Hello, everybody, and welcome back to episode 36 of This is the Year, the Swiss AI Engineering Podcast. And as always, we have a vast array of topics prepared for you guys. We're going to start with Gemini 3 that just came out a few days ago. We also talk briefly about the new Saudi NVIDIA and Grok collaboration. We talk about data centers in space, some futuristic ideas there. Then we do a pulse check on which AI tools we are using building AI in Switzerland. And then we do a research corner, a few ideas coming from my AI courses at universities, and also a finance corner at the end, because again, the market is down. I probably have to clarify a few things. With me today, once again, João from Lisbon. How is life? Is it also snowing there or not? Not yet.
I don't think Portugal has that much snow happening. I think the last time we had snow was somewhere in 2006, maybe 2008. I had to check. But I ran out of coffee today, so I had
That's
very,
bad
very.
news.
I had a very different day than I usually do. So that's something I still can't fix. Maybe, and I saw. Like I went to like some local coffee roaster to get the bags. Still very much human operated, and like it is like kind of a distribution center. And I was seeing their setup, a lot of paper, a lot of different folders, and like paper
You
lying
mean a
around,
coffee
coffee
shop?
machines. No, I think it's they're this roast coffee, and they sell like the beans for you to do the coffee
Fair enough. Okay.
at home. But the setup that they use, the logistics setup, like they had machines to fill the bags, and those are mostly like automatic or at least like machine operated. But the logistics part, like the office, it looked like a late 90s version of The Office. Have you heard of
Some
the
old
show The
school.
Office?
Some old
Yeah, like
school.
very much paper based.
But you know what? That's anyway what we're mostly talking about, right? So you have to like focus on these businesses, focus on these business ideas, and then when you actually start in engineering AI or AI agents, even you realize that most of the stuff is not even digital. So you have to work with scanned versions of any documents or any particular data set that's not even available digital. That's might be laying around in some folder and it's been archived for the last 15, 20 years. That's
Yeah,
anyway
and
a good analogy.
if you're on LinkedIn, think everyone's using AI 25 hours of the day, and like every company is fully digitized, and it's simply not. They want to, and they'll promote it and post about it, but behind the scenes, there's a bunch of paper going around still. So it's still very much the year, and I think it'll still very much be like a 5-year, 10-year process of moving these companies to a more digital format, so like, you can speed up things.
Exactly. I mean, at the end of the day, yes, we see these new model releases. Let's maybe get started with Gemini 3 that was announced by Google. Very high level in a nutshell. It's the most cutting edge, most kind of, I would say, instant Google model Google has ever been created over the last years. And it's certainly, I would say, a top 3 model, especially if we, for example, look into artificial analysis, kind of the ranking websites amongst many. It does land, I can maybe put it on the screen here, the number 1 spot on intelligence. It has a 1 million token context window, as we usually joke about that. Joao, again, you mentioned it before the show quickly. If you kind of balloon that and you really utilize all the million input tokens, for example, you might actually be spending a coffee each time you do any particular analysis. So cost to quality to actual utility of the context might not always be in the best and most balanced way. What's your take on Gemini 3? Are you surprised Google dropped it with that big of a fashion, as they more or less didn't? Or
I mean,
what's your first take?
their take on marketing is at least unique and very much different from like what OpenAI does. But people were saying it before, people were saying it now. A very wise person once said that they would release Gemini 3 before the year would end. It was me. I said it. And I was right, because I don't think Google feels the need to speed up or hype the models. Like, they don't do like half releases. They don't do like minor version updates, and they don't promote them even when they do them. Because I think they're doing it for the long term. Like, Google has this setup of massive infrastructure, massive talent. Like, their workforce is upwards in like tens of thousands of people, and they just can research it, make sure it's like a very, very solid model, then release it. In terms of benchmarks, I mean, I've used it a little bit. It's pretty good. I mean, it's smart. The first few times I interacted with it, I got that feeling people were having with GPT 4 Omni or 4.0, where it was a bit sycophantic. So like it would say, "Oh, great question! Like you're onto something," and I had a little bit of that feeling with Gemini 3.0. I have tried to replicate it. I think it's dialed down a bit, so maybe it was just the initial vibe that I got.
It's just a
But
motivating model.
it's it's
It helps
overall
you
like
to
a
get
very
stuff done.
very strong model. And if you go to, I think it's ARC, the benchmark, like super tough questions. I think the last models are hitting like 30-40%, and people are saying we hit a ceiling. We can't make these models any smarter. Gemini 3.0 comes out and leaps like the best models by 10 or 15% on that benchmark. So still very much broke the ceiling of what people thought we had, and I'm happy to have the ceiling broken. But that leaves them in a very unique space because there are no models that have a comparable amount of intelligence that Gemini 3.0 seems to have.
Yep. I mean, it's a great release, to say the least. It also is represented in the stock price. I would say many investors, analysts, they were doubting Google for multiple years, because it, generally speaking, is more or less maybe competing with their core business model, being an ad-based business model. And now I think they're figuring out, again, being capable, of course, so that's not really a surprise, developing and engineering the most cutting edge, the most intelligent model at the same time. And also probably step by step trying to figure out how that will impact their business model in the first place. Maybe, as we've seen multiple times, there is this AI mode. I can also put it on the screen if you haven't used it on google.com, like the actual main hero components are being touched even now. And there is some maybe different types of recommender engines that are now large language model based and maybe even integrated into Gemini in the very near future. So Google is doing pretty well. Again, from our own perspective, we are still running on Claude models, but maybe again, if Gemini keeps outperforming and keeps also being incredibly good in code generation, who knows? We usually have the capability to switch. That's also something we've always been proclaiming on this podcast. You have to build model agnostic. You don't have to have a lock-in into any of the providers. So once a new model comes out, like Gemini 3, you can more or less, with a little bit of tweaking, change between the models ideally. Then the second announcement I quickly want to also get your feedback on just in a second is the proponent. Again, we've been, probably for the last 4 weeks, we are talking about Saudi becoming more into the center of AI inference and AI training aside from China. So again, to really repaint the picture, we have the West developing most of the IP, for example, NVIDIA. Then we have the East, technically Taiwan, TSMC, and also now being built, these factories being built in the US, generating and producing the chips. In Europe, we have some sort of question mark, what's really our role? And then the inference and training needs to be in particular locations where we have very close and likely a very large amount of energy available, such, for example, in Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia and NVIDIA, together with Elon Musk's Grok from xAI, they just recently announced, actually yesterday, a few hours ago, a 500 megawatt data center. Again, not a big surprise because Saudi really wants to transform their economy from an oil-based economy to an intelligent-based economy. I was in Saudi Arabia probably half a year ago in Riyadh, in Jeddah as well, and you just see the constructions. Maybe I can put a few pictures here on the screen. Like everywhere you just look in Riyadh, there's like constructions happening. It's not only these AI data centers, it's pretty much everything. Business centers, universities, and all these kind of upswing, I think the West is now recognizing with a combination of infinite energy, again, being NVIDIA, Grok, and Humane. We talked about Humane multiple times. It's their local kind of hyperscaler. At the same time, they have an Arabic-based model, and it's a truly unique company as well. So that's big news from Saudi. Again, Joao, what's the take on, are you surprised they're again pushing more announcements from Saudi, or seems the next logical step?
It seems like the next logical step. I think anywhere there's available land and like cheap power, it'll be like a good place to put data centers. I think they might not get the adoption, at least initially, that they would hope for, because companies are very wary of where they run their AIs. I mean, everyone wants to do it for cheap, but you also want to be compliant. I mean, you don't want to save a few $1,000s to then
For inference,
have to then have to pay like a few $1 million in fines because your data got leaked somewhere in different continent. So I think they will get traction. People do want this level of inference, and the amount of inference we need in the world will need to will get bigger and bigger like every few weeks. And so we need more inference and need more power doing so. But from the business side, I see a lot of people, especially the security centers and my friends over like doing SOC work, like the cybersecurity analysts, having nightmares right now about doing like all the compliance things to move these kinds of projects over to a Saudi data center.
I
But
mean,
it will be
it's
done, I
for
think. At least by a few companies, they'll do it.
For at least again for probably using the services inferencing, but maybe just simply training. Like you simply model training, like the next Grok model, the next Claude model. It might actually just be fully done in Saudi at lower electricity costs. At the same time, they have the capabilities again having infinite amount of chips, ideally coming from NVIDIA. So that's a little bit the availability of where do you do the training, and then inference is a completely different story. At the same time, of course, it's fairly common knowledge, but if a financial analyst or a banking particular employee is using ChatGPT on a browser setup, that inference is most likely also not happening within the country's borders. So that's why there's all these like, let's just use Azure kind of hosted models, which is maybe an older GPT, and it's certainly not fine-tuned or aligned for the use cases. So their inference becomes probably a problem, or still is a problem. But again, training Saudi might be a really good fit. Also, this is a bit of a futuristic idea, but you mentioned it just slightly on the tangent before. Yes, we might have training close to the electricity sources, or we can have an inference in space. So that's a little bit maybe the next level of complete futuristic ideas. Again, here's the case why I think it might make sense to push most AI inference into space. One is for cooling, because you don't need these vast kind of engines to cool the chips down, which according to Jensen from NVIDIA is around 90+% of any rack. It's just cooling. You don't need that. Heat simply radiates in space, and the electricity. So these constraints that we might have on Earth, they kind of go away when you have solar-powered satellites that are holding a 2-ton data center and flying around at several thousand kilometers per hour in space. So that's certainly something. Let's say in an ideal future, a decade, 15 years from today, maybe you have training on these very large clusters. They have to be coherent, maybe in Saudi Arabia, maybe in China and in the US. And then inference will be done on satellites that are tied to a mini data center. What's the idea here? Do you think that's completely crazy, or that's the future we're heading to?
If only there was someone who had both like one of the major AI companies and a space company. Like maybe someone like could connect the dots. But I think it can be done, and there is like from a logistics standpoint, not only the power and the cooling, but also the latency. So like I've seen projects talking about like this type of network having a kind of an internet extension in space, so that you could have theoretically your connection, instead of going through fiber under the ocean across the world to like some data center or some Facebook server, it goes through space. And you might think, oh, that's taking the long way around. But actually, because there's not much in space at the moment, it can go almost in a straight line, maybe like with a few nodes. And the predicted latency was better. Like the milliseconds it takes to reach half the world would be like a significant gain. And I saw it initially as part of like a stock market project. So like for stock indexes, for stock prices, like the information to have the closest and fastest ability to do your and call your options, they were proposing this kind of project. I never saw that materialize, or at least I haven't seen it. Maybe it's happening behind the scenes. They're slowly building technology for it. But I think it'd also be very suitable for this kind of inference. Because again, the models already take quite a bit of time to think of what you want to say, or to making the decisions, to reason, and you don't want to add any more time to that. Having a real low latency, a good inference power that you can distribute across the world. You can even have a server close to you doing your inference, where someone across the world, in Canada, in Japan, in Australia, have their own servers that are hovering above them. It could be a very, very cool technology. I don't think we're at that level just yet. I think it'll take at least 2 to 5 years, depending on what breakthroughs we manage to actually get it to work, because it is super expensive to launch things up there. Not sure if you tried having your own rocket, but it goes up. Your money burns fast.
Elon Musk does have a company that's capable of launching ideally with Starship. So let's see where it's actually heading. You're maybe even more bullish than me. In 2 years, we have inference data centers flying around in space. That could be.
I mean, at least some prototypes. Some prototypes, and not just Musk. Bezos also has both AWS and I think, you know what his company is called?
Blue Origin.
Exactly. So maybe they had it in their like roadmap for a very long time, and we're just now hearing about it. Hence my prediction of 2 years.
That's good. That could be a bullish scenario. Talking about Jeff Bezos, he also recently actually just announced, maybe the last news on this corner, a new AI company. Put it on the screen here as well. That's focused on not on like particular subsets of white collar work, like for example coding, but this time manufacturing and maybe aerospace engineering. So AI for manufacturing, maybe for some hard sciences. So that's a new company. He's now co-chairing as CEO as well. So Jeff, Elon, and also Google. These are maybe the 3 announcements we can bring you on this week. And then again, a futuristic idea of AI inference data centers in space. Let's do a quick pulse check, Joao. Where do you lay your current focus on which AI tools that you're using for what particular purpose? We haven't talked about that for probably 4 to 5 weeks. So the November pulse check. What's your current day-to-day AI tools that you're using?
I mean, for coding, I'm a big fan of Copilot, not because it's from Microsoft, but because it just gives me very easy access to a bunch of different models. I mean, Gemini 3.0 came out, I think, like 2 days ago. A few hours after it released, at least a day after it released, I had Gemini 2.0 in the coding environment, so I could use it to check it out, see how it codes. I've been noticing that the Gemini lineup, the Claude lineup, and the GPT lineup, they all have different coding styles. Even if they follow the exact same prompt and they have the same instructions, and I've left them like a guide on how to code like my projects, they're all interpreted a little bit differently, which makes the case if you have an AI business and an AI software and you want to jump around between models, you can and you should be able to. We've always been defending that, but you might need to adjust and like thoroughly check if the behavior is the exact same, because Claude has been notoriously more verbose and tells you more about like how is he doing things. GPT not so much, but it is good at reviewing and catching things that you might not have noticed. And Gemini, I've been using it also, like give it a few tasks in the coding. They were notoriously hard tasks, I'll give it that. It was maybe comparable to Sonnet. So if you go to the benchmarks, Gemini 3.0, in terms of raw intelligence, is way, way above most other models. In terms of coding, Claude Sonnet 4.5 is still in the lead, which makes me, I think, a little bit hopeful that someone will take the lead after them. But it is like a very hard area to beat, and also a very hard model to beat. Like it's a really good performer. Sonnet 4.5, I think, codes better than 85% of the people I've met, and some of them were senior engineers. So
it's slowly replacing.
I'll let you think about it.
The jobs. I mean, at the end of the day, maybe that's also the fourth piece of news. There was a few collabs announcement this week. You can now ideally also use Claude Sonnet on Azure. So there was this collaboration between Anthropic, between Microsoft, and once again NVIDIA. They were announcing again this new collaboration. So Azure should get ideally the Claude setups as well, so you can fully use these models. Maybe then I will also in return kind of the Copilot setup be enriched with Claude series model. For my end, maybe just the tools I'm using on a day-to-day. It's mostly Versal v0 that I've been using probably for half a year every single day almost, at least, to shoot 4 to 10 prompts. A particular good aspect if you're using Versal v0 is you can always ask to revise the entire code base, especially with increased context length now. They can actually be executing that. So I'll put it on the screen here. There is also a tutorial that we just did on Versal v0. Feel free to check it out. Again, we are deploying these services also in our own kind of builds, and it's not something that's just for toy use cases. So Versal v0, that I also became an ambassador now. Feel free to check it out. there's also a free link in the description for you to get some free credits, which is always amazing. I used to spend hundreds of bucks a month to use these agents. And now, again, you might actually be getting for free a few credits to get started. Last point, what's the heat in the stock market, Joe? What do you think is happening? Is it a bubble that's now popped? The AI bubble is finally here on the 20th of November. Are we talking about the AI bubble, or what is happening? What's your take?
I don't want to call it a bubble just yet. I think there's been a slight correction, and the correction that will keep happening at least for a little while. There are a lot of companies that got financed, and they were built on this like AI models, and some of them are really useful, some of them got traction, some of them found their niche market. And I'll give you an example. For most use cases when using these models, you want to build RAG, right? Like you want to have these models' ability to search your documents. And so a bunch of different companies came up to be the tool that your models use to search the documents. Like we call them vector databases. And Pinecone, Milvus, Quadrant, Weaviate, like there were at least a dozen of them that were popping up, and they got really big, really, really fast. Like people talk about them, you'd see them on the cloud store. People were deploying them and doing comparisons, and they were useful. However, every major cloud has their own vector database service, and if they didn't have it, they developed it in the meantime. And if you're hosting your service on AWS, yes, you can deploy a Pinecone or a Milvus or a Chroma, like this kind of services, but you can also use AWS own OpenSearch service. And it's from AWS, so you have everything like compatible with all the other services you're already using, and it's a little bit less work, and it does comparably just as well. I mean, the benchmarks between like databases are hard to like sometimes compare. It really depends on the use case, but they all do just fine. It's very rarely that your bottleneck in your service is the vector database itself. And so AWS had OpenSearch, Azure had the Azure AI search. Google also built like the Vertex AI, they called vector search. They all have like a very, very similar naming schemes. And these like services kind of killed off, or are at least stealing a lot of traction that this open source or this heavily funded, venture capital funded vector databases had. And I think this will spread out to a bunch of different services. And not only vector databases, but companies who brought up and like who are using these AI models will now struggle to keep their market share because ChatGPT is expanding and can do more and more. Gemini will be integrated into almost every service in the Google stack. I mean, from your phone to your search, to your email, to your calendar, Google has, I think, a very wide array of like, services it can integrate Gemini to. And you just like, have to keep finding like specific niche markets to hit if you're starting to like your own startup or if you have like a business idea, because the easy market, or at least the biggest demographics, are already being captured by the bigger players. It's a very David versus Goliath kind of thing, but David has maybe $100,000 in his account, and Goliath has a few trillion, maybe. I mean, I'm not sure what's Google's bank account look like, but I think it has a lot more zeros than I can count.
So your case is there is some sort of consolidation happening. Some of the players that we thought are going to be the rising stars, they kind of got, I would say, well, kind of beaten by the large players. And at the same time, there might just generally, I think, a little bit of a cool-off happening in terms of risk assets. Again, we have had a pretty okay year post, I would say, April, when we had this Liberation Day happening. Many of the AI stocks, there was this conundrum of them being overvalued. One particular aspect to look at is usually forward PE. It has all these multiples that were a little bit higher, on the higher side of things usually. Yet again, yesterday was the NVIDIA earnings calls as well, and maybe I can quickly just finish the argument based on that. Again, the earnings were tremendously good. The outlook was better than expected. Both bottom and top line were beaten. So from NVIDIA's perspective, and in return also for the entire AI market's perspective, notably AMD, Micron, TSMC, ASML for infrastructure provisioning, then Google, of course, with a new model now, AWS, Microsoft. Generally, there should be some sort of, well, upswing happening, which is not yet happening based on these NVIDIA earnings. I think it's a little bit of a cooling off period for the end of the year. There's also this large conundrum if rates are going to be cut once again. I can maybe put the latest poly-market betting here on the screen, what's currently looking like. It's a little bit of an open question still. And generally speaking, towards the end of the year, yes, there might be some sort of slight correction actually now happening towards lower evaluations. But again, for 2026, given everything that we just talked about today, new models, new capabilities, new partnerships, new data centers, it might be again a consolidation period, new partnerships being formed. And then ideally in 2026, we talk about more agentic artificial intelligence that's being baked into many businesses. And a lot of the analog papers show that we started today's episode with are being digitized. And we can train AI, or we can use RAG or any other mechanisms to be leveraging company proprietary data. That's a bit my read, not on the alert type of situation currently. I don't think there is any bubble that's been popping. Might be a little bit in a correction to the downside. Any other last comments, Joao, from your end? Stock market or generally?
I saw it on, I think on LinkedIn take, and I think I never disagreed so fast with someone's take, just from reading about it. Which was a bit of the extreme that you were saying about the consolidation, saying like in the light of this Gemini 3.0 coming out, that Google has like this massive funding from all these services that they make money out of. They have the talent, they have like a place to integrate this model to, so they don't have to sell the model to anyone else. Like Google was the one big player to rule them all because OpenAI was burning, and it is burning money to basically offer ChatGPT to people. They're trying to lock in as many people as they can. I think OpenAI has launched like a kind of a light subscription for developing countries. And so their take was Google's a big player. OpenAI is like dying, and so is Microsoft. Microsoft cannot like fund Google or cannot have like they don't have their own models. And who even is Anthropic? It's what this
that was
person
the take.
wrote.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And I disagreed so hard with it because I know their point, and from like if you're a consumer, you might not know about Anthropic unless you hear a certain AI podcast. But Anthropic has one of the like most powerful models out there, and they're not burning money like OpenAI. Your models are more expensive usually than OpenAI's or Gemini's, but they have the performance to back it up, and people keep using them. They focus on the coding part of these models, and these models are really great at coding. People use them, people pay for them, are willing to pay a premium price for the tokens because they're just that good. So Anthropic, I think, I don't have an insight on their books. I don't think they publish that anytime soon, but I'm pretty sure they're at a level they're self-sustaining. They focus on business-to-business market. Yeah, I think it's been working so far. People like the cloud models. They don't swing as much from the PR as OpenAI does. And so Anthropic is a very solid company. It's not Anthropic who. And OpenAI, yes, they're burning money, but also, like I usually say, they are the Tupperware of AI chatbots.
Well, yeah.
So everyone knows OpenAI, everyone knows ChatGPT. ChatGPT has become the term to use for AI. So Google, yes, is a big player, and I think there'll be some consolidation, but let's not go to extremes and say Google is the only one big player in the market. I want some competition.
Exactly. So ideally there will be competition. Also, we talked about that in the past. We probably will bring it up again in the next week's episode. Chinese models like Kimi, like from Moonshot AI, and some other models coming from Alibaba, like Qwen, they're always in the making to be, again, or at least in the consideration to be deployed in any particular service you might actually be building. With one big caveat, you have to kind of configure and self-host them-ish on your hyperscaler like AWS, Azure, or GCP ideally, which comes with extra work, extra configuration workload, but then you can use open source models to your benefit for your SaaS and or your clients. So that was it for the episode number 36. We talked about Gemini 3, the latest and most intelligent model coming from Google, Saudi, NVIDIA, and Grok collaboration. We talked about data centers in space, a quick pulse check for Versal V0 being the most, I would say, widely used front-end development engine, and a little bit of a finance read into the market that we are currently seeing some cooling up. Great. Thank you, Joao, for joining yet again for another episode next week. We ideally have some more topics on the roster. Feel free to also check out our tutorials from N8N and much more without any coding experience, you can be building great AI products and services. In that case, take care. See you in the next one. Bye bye.